From St. Gregory, Palamas, on the Sunday of the Holy Myrrh bearers, in which it is said that the Mother of God was the first to see the Lord after he rose from the dead. The resurrection of the Lord is the renewal of human nature, and the renewal, recreation, and return to immortality of the first Adam, who was swallowed up by death because of sin, and through death went back to the earth from which he was formed. In the beginning, nobody saw Adam being made and brought to life, for no one existed yet at that time. However, once he had received the breath of life breathed into him by God, a woman was the first to see him. For Eve was the first human being after him. In the same way, no one saw the second Adam, that is, the Lord, rising from the dead, since none of the disciples were present, and the soldiers keeping the tomb had been shaken with fear and became like dead men. But after the resurrection, it was the woman who saw him first of all, as we heard in today's Gospel in Mark. Now when Jesus, it says, was risen early the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene. The evangelist seems to be telling us clearly that it was early in the morning when the Lord arose that he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, and that he appeared at the very time of the resurrection. However, this is not what he says, as will become clear if we look more carefully. A little earlier, Mark, together with the other evangelists, says that Mary had also come earlier to the tomb with the other myrrh bearers, and finding it empty, they went away. So the Lord had risen long before the hour of the morning when she saw him. When the evangelist indicates the time of that earlier visit, he does not say simply early, as he does here, but very early in the morning. There, they call the first hint of pale light on the horizon sunrise, as John shows by saying that Mary Magdalene came early when it was yet dark unto the sepulchre, and seeth the stone taken away from the sepulchre. According to John, she did not just come to the sepulchre at that time, but left it without seeing the Lord. She ran and came to Peter and John and told them not that the Lord had risen, but that he had been taken away from the sepulchre, as she was not yet aware of the resurrection. So the Lord did not appear to Mary absolutely first of all, but when full daylight had come. There is something which the evangelists tell us in a veiled way, but which I shall reveal to your charity. As was right and just, the Mother of God was the first person to receive from the Lord the good news of the resurrection, and she saw him risen and had the joy of his divine words before anyone else. She not only beheld him with her eyes and heard him with her ears, but was the first and only person to touch him with her hands. His most pure feet. If the evangelists do not say all this openly, it is because they do not want to put forward his mother as a witness, lest they give the unbelievers grounds for suspicion. As we are now, however, by the grace of the resurrection, addressing believers, and the subject of today's feast obliges us to clarify everything that concerns the myrrh bearers, this too shall be revealed, with leave from him who said, "Nothing is secret that shall not be made manifest." The myrrh bearers are those women who followed the Lord in company with his mother, who stayed with her at the time of the saving passion, and were intent upon anointing the Lord's body with myrrh. When Joseph and Nicodemus sought and obtained the Master's body from Pilate, they took it down from the cross, wrapped it in fine linen cloths with a glue-like spices, put it in the sepulchre hewn out of the rock, and put a large stone in the doorway. Meanwhile, according to the evangelist Mark, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there watching, sitting opposite the tomb. When he refers to the other Mary, he clearly means the Mother of God, for she was also the mother of Joseph and James, the sons of Joseph the betrothed. But they were not the only ones there watching when the Lord was being laid in the tomb. There were other women as well, as Luke tells us when he writes, and the women also, which came with him from Galilee, followed after and beheld the sepulchre, and how his body was laid. Luke 23. It was Mary Magdalene and Joanna, and Mary, the mother of James, and the other women that were with them. Luke 24. He says that they returned and brought spices and ointments, and yet they did not fully understand that he himself is truly the fragrance of life for those who come to him in faith, though the smell of death to those who are disobedient to the end. The scent of his garments, that is, of his body, is above all spices, and his name is like the ointment poured forth, filling the whole world with divine fragrance. The prepared myrrh and spices intending on the one hand to honor the dead, and on the other to assuage their anointing the stench of the body as it decomposed, for the sake of those who wanted to stay beside it. When they had prepared the ointments and spices, they rested on the Sabbath according to the commandment, for they had not yet understood the true Sabbaths, nor had they discovered that exceedingly blessed Sabbath which brought human nature up from the nethermost regions of Hades to divine heavenly heights full of light. Now upon the first day of the week, at the early dawn, as Luke tells us, they came into the sepulchre, bringing the spices which they had prepared. However, Matthew says that it was in the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, in Matthew, and refers to two women coming. According to John, it was dark, and only Mary Magdalene approached, whereas Mark tells us it was very early in the morning, the first day of the week, and there were three women who came. The evangelists all call Sunday the first day of the week, and by the expression, the end of the Sabbath, at the early dawn, very early in the morning, and early when it was dark, they meant the time around dawn when light and darkness mingle together. This is when the eastern horizon begins to grow light, heralding the day. If you were to observe the horizon from afar, you might see it beginning to be tinged with light at about the 9th hour of the night, about 3 a.m., with 3 hours still to go before the daylight. The evangelists seem to a certain extent to disagree about what time it was and how many women were there. This is because, as we have said, there were many myrrh bearers, and they did not come just once to the tomb, but 2 or 3 times. They came in groups, but not always the same women. They all came at dawn, but not precisely at the same time. And Mary Magdalene came once more on her own and stayed longer. The evangelist refers to one of the occasions when the myrrh bearers approached and passes over the others. However, I conclude and infer from all the evangelists, as I have said before, that the Theotokos was the first to come to the tomb of her son and God, bringing Mary Magdalene with her. I gather this above from all the evangelist Matthew, who says, there came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, who was obviously the mother of God, to see the sepulchre. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door of the sepulchre and sat upon it. His countenance was like lightning, and his raiment was white as snow. And for fear of him, the keepers did shake and became as dead men. All the other women came after the earthquake, when the keepers had fled, and found the sepulchre open and the stone rolled away. The Virgin Mother, however, was there when the earthquake took place. The stone was rolled away, and the tomb opened, and the keepers were still present. Though they were shaken with fear. And when they got to their feet after the earthquake, they immediately took to flight, whereas the Mother of God delighted herself in the sight without fear. It seems to me that the life-bearing tomb opened first for her sake, because everything in heaven above and on earth below was opened first for her, and through her to us. And that the angel shone like lightning on her account, so that even though it was still dark, by the angel's abundant light, she could see not only the empty tomb, but also the grave clothes lying in order, and bearing witness in many ways to the fact that he who had been buried there had risen. The angel who announced the good news was surely Gabriel himself. For when he who had originally said to her, "Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God," saw her hastening to the tomb, he made speed now to come down and greet the ever-virgin once more with the same words, to announce the good news, that he who had been born of her without seed had risen from the dead, to take away the stone, and to show the empty tomb and the grave clothes as confirmation of his tidings. And the angel, it says, answered and said unto the women, "Fear not ye. Do ye seek Jesus, which is crucified? He is risen. Come and see the place where the Lord lay." Even though he says, "You see the keepers struck down with fear, you are not to be afraid. I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. Not only can he not be held by the locks, bars, and seals of Hades, death, and the tomb, but he is also Lord of us, the immortal, heavenly angels. And he alone is Lord of all. Come and see," he says, "the place where the Lord lay, and go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead." And they departed, it says, with fear and great joy. Once more, it seems to me that it was Mary Magdalene and the other women who had gathered with them by this time who still felt fear, for they had not understood the force of the angel's words, nor could they fully perceive the light so as to see and discover exactly what had happened. It was the Mother of God, on the other hand, who was possessed of great joy, because she understood what the angel had said, and was completely filled with light, being utterly purified and full of divine grace. Therefore she knew the truth for sure, and believed the archangel, since his trustworthiness had long since been demonstrated to her through works. As the divinely wise virgin was present when these things happened, how could she fail to understand what had been accomplished? She saw an earthquake, and a great one at that, an angel descending from heaven, flashing forth as lightning. She saw the keepers being struck down as dead, and the stone being moved, and the tomb empty. She also saw the great miracle of the grave clothes, which had not been undone, and were held together with myrrh and aloes, but were visibly empty of the body, which you can see, by the way, in the icon today, if you look close. In addition to all this, there was the angel's joyful appearance and message to her. But when they had departed after these good tidings, it was as if Mary Magdalene had not heard the angel, or perhaps his greeting, and was not for her, because it was not for her, since her only precise statement was that the sepulchre was empty. She made no mention of the grave clothes. Then she runs and comes to Simon Peter and the other disciple, as John tells us. And the Virgin Mother of God, on the other hand, returned to the company of the other women to the place where she had come. And behold, as Matthew said, Jesus met them, saying, "All hail." Notice that the Mother of God saw him who for our salvation suffered in the flesh, was buried and rose again, even before Mary Magdalene. And they came, it says, and held him by the feet and worshipped him. When the Theotokos, together with Mary Magdalene, heard the good news of the resurrection from the angel, only she understood the meaning of the words. In the same way now, when, in the company of the other women, she met her Son and God, She was the first of them to see and to recognize the risen Lord, and falling down before him, she grasped his feet and became his apostle to the apostles. It is from John that we learned that Mary Magdalene was not with the Mother of God at the time when the Lord met her as she was returning from the tomb, appeared to her and addressed her. For John says that Mary Magdalene runs and comes to Simon Peter and to the other disciple whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the sepulchre, and we know not where they have laid him." John 20. If he had met her, and she had seen him, touched him with her hands, and heard him speak, how could she have said, as she did, that they had taken him away, laid him in an unknown place? But after Peter and John had ran to the tomb and seen the linen cloths and gone away, Mary, it says, stood without at the sepulchre weeping. Observe that not only had she yet to hear him, but she also had yet to hear the news. When the angels appeared and asked her, "Woman, why do you weep?" Again, she replied as if speaking about a corpse. And when she turned around and saw the Lord, she still did not understand. But when he too asked why she was weeping, she gave the same reply, until he called her by name and proved it that he was who he was. Then she too fell down before him and tried to embrace his feet in greeting, but heard him say, "Touch me not." For this we learn when the Lord appeared earlier to his mother and the women with her, it was only his mother whom he allowed to touch his feet. Even though Matthew attributes this action to the other women too, being unwilling to put forward the Lord's mother as a witness to such events for the reason we stated at the beginning, that they did not want to have Mary be the key witness. The ever virgin was the first to come to the tomb and receive the good tidings of the resurrection, but afterwards many women came together, and they too saw the stone roll away and heard the angels. Then after seeing and hearing, they separated. Some, as Mark tells us, fled from the sepulchre, for they trembled and were amazed. Neither said they anything to any man, for they were afraid. Others followed the Lord's mother. These it was who had the good fortune to see the Master, and he addressed by them. Mary Magdalene, on the other hand, went to tell Peter and John, and returned with them to the tomb to warn her on her own. Then they left. When they left, she stayed, and she too was accounted worthy to see the Master. And they sent to the apostles. Once more, she came to them to tell them all, as John says, that she had seen the Lord, and that he had spoken these things unto her. Mark tells us that the Lord appeared to Mary Magdalene early in the morning, which means when full daylight had come. Obviously after dawn had passed. But she does not state the Lord's resurrection happened then, or that it was the first time he had appeared. So now we have a thorough explanation of everything that concerns the myrrh bearers, and as we have sought all along, agreement between the four evangelists on the subject. On the very day of the resurrection of the apostles heard from the myrrh bearers, from Peter, from Luke and Cleopas, that the Lord was alive and had appeared to them, but they did not believe. That is why they were reproached by him when he appeared to them later when they were gathered together. However, once he had shown himself in many ways and on many occasions to be alive, not only did they all believe, but they preached everywhere. Their sound has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. The Lord working with them and confirming the word with signs following. For signs were absolutely necessary until the word had been preached throughout the world. But if there had to be great signs to prove and confirm that the teaching was true, there also had to be signs, though not great ones, to show whether those who had received the word really believed. What signs do I mean? The witness of their deeds, Show me, it says, thy faithful works. And who is faithful? By his good life, let him show his works. How can we believe that someone has truly divine, great, exalted, even heavenly understanding, such as godliness entails, if he clings to sordid actions and is engrossed in the earth and in its concerns? It is pointless for someone to say that he has faith in God if he does not have the works which go with the faith. What benefit were their lamps to the foolish virgins who had no oil, namely the deeds of love and compassion? What good did calling Abraham his father to do with the rich man frying in the unquenchable flame for his pitilessness towards Lazarus? What use was his apparent obedience to the invitation to that man who had failed to acquire through good works a garment fitting for the divine wedding and the bridal chamber of immortality? He was invited and approached because he clearly believed, and he sat down alongside those holy guests. But when he was convicted and put to shame for being clothed in depraved habits and deeds, he was mercilessly bound hand and foot and cast into hellfire, where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. May no one called by Christ have this experience, but may all display a way of life which goes with our faith, that we may enter the bridal chamber unfading joy and spend eternity with the saints, dwelling in all those places with those who rejoice. Amen. And today we consider St. Pelagia, the great holy martyr, who really exampled the life of the myrrh-bearing women with her choices and the way she lived her life. And she was bold, Pelagia. She was bold in that she preached the gospel. She was unafraid, although she was tortured relentlessly, but she gave her heart to this very thing that St. Gregory is expounding for us today, that the message of the resurrection has to be on our lips. The message of the resurrection has to be our life. The message of the resurrection has to be all that we are about, so that we can express with St. Pelagia, with the holy saints, with our patrons Peter and Paul, who also project and portray the gospel to all people. I pray, brothers and sisters, that we can see, as St. Gregory is pointing out here, also the holiness of the Mother of God, how she was the first one to be with the Lord. And in that, we ask for her intercessions on a regular basis, and that is why, because she is so close to the Lord. Christ is risen. Christos voskreσε. Christos aneste.